let me finish. I will answer the question happily. But look, when you have these kinds of lazy assumptions built into questions, it makes it hard to have a constructive dialogue.
What is a lazy assumption? I said you all had to win.
You said no. You said is it my expectation?
I'm speaking
because now you're putting. You said is it my expectation?
Every so often, CNN has Stephen Miller on their show. However, every single time Stephen Miller goes on CNN, he debunks Democrat talking points and just speaks the facts and creates some of the best meltdown moments we've ever seen.
And I would gladly come back on when I have more information to share with you.
They were set up, just to be clear. But quickly, where is the White House on habeas corpus?
Was treated unfairly. Yes, I'm sure the illegal alien was treated very unfairly.
Okay. Where is the White House?
So this is going to be a fun, relaxing video. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. And if you want, leave a like and leave a comment. It helps the channel out a ton. Here we go.
Christy Nome posted a stunning allegation saying that an undocumented migrant sent a letter threatening to kill the president, promising to self-deport after the assassination. CNN reporting shows that investigators believe the migrant was set up. It was a victim of a setup. What is the administration going to do now? And this is an undocumented immigrant. I do want to note that. But this was someone who came forward, was a victim of a crime, and now law enforcement believes he was set up. Go ahead.
Well, I want to clarify what you mean, so we're talking about the same thing. Are you saying this immigrant was here illegally?
Yes, but I am, and that's why I said that. I clarified that.
You said undocumented, and I wasn't clear what that means. I'm assuming they have a fake ID. I'm assuming they have a fake social security number.
That's neither here nor there.
That's
getting away from the question, Stephen.
Again, you could technically be an undocumented American because you don't have your driver's license or a passport. And I do want to point out, this is why this CNN news anchor had to catch herself, because she knew she was going to get called out by Stephen Miller. Stephen Miller does not let the smallest of details get past him. It is confusing to say a migrant versus an undocumented migrant, not the same thing.
I want this to be, and call me naive, a good faith discussion about what's happening right now.
But when we use language that's designed to obscure the truth, that's not good faith.
An illegal
alien is an illegal alien. They're not an undocumented migrant.
Okay, that's fine. That's another discussion for another date.
I don't know the details of the assassination threat. All I can say, based on what you're telling me, is there's an illegal alien in our country who's making menacing threats. Regardless of the facts or circumstances, we don't want him here. We're going to get to the bottom of it, and I would gladly come back on when I have more information to share with you.
They were set up, just to be clear. But quickly, where is the White House on habeas corpus?
The illegal alien was treated unfairly. Yes, I'm sure the illegal alien was treated very unfairly.
Where is the White House?
Okay, either way, the CNN news anchor even said, hey, the person is illegal. That is why Stephen Miller is laughing. He's like, okay, the guy made a threat, whatever, he's also an illegal alien, he has to be deported. No matter how you spin this, and this is always the biggest issue for Democrats, or if CNN is trying to talk about this, they are an illegal immigrant, and regardless, they will end up getting deported without the proper paperwork.
Yet, even just yesterday we saw, whenever a judge rules against this administration, you say they're going rogue. Do you think a judge should just rubber stamp what your White House does? If not, what checks and balances do you think should be in place for this White House?
It is not the job of a district court judge to perform an individual green light or red light on every single policy that the president takes as the head of the executive branch. Just think about the premise baked into your question, respectfully, Pam. You're saying that when the American people elect a president of the United States of America,
I'm not saying
well, it's the implication, who is the sole head of the executive branch. Well, let me finish. I will answer the question happily. But look, when you have these kinds of lazy assumptions built into questions, it makes it hard to have a constructive dialogue.
What is a lazy assumption? I said you all had to win.
You said no. You said is it my expectation?
I'm speaking
because
now you're putting.
You said is it my?
I'll be honest with you. I've never seen this much gaslighting or pushback on Stephen Miller. So I don't know if this news anchor had an agenda. Typically, they will let Stephen Miller talk. But again, the premise of the question was ridiculous as far as making an insertion and opinion about the judges and how Trump acts, and then picking out these random details that are not even accurate.
Expectation. It's not just you. It's the whole media. In other words, when you hear a sentence like...
It is a completely fair question. You say judges who rule against the White House.
And I will gladly answer it. When you say, do we think district court judges should rubber stamp each action? There is a premise that is built into that that is absurd. The president is the sole head of the executive branch. He's the only officer in the entire government that's elected by the entire American people. Democracy cannot function. In fact, democracy does not exist at all if each action the president takes foreign policy, diplomatic, military, national security has to be individually approved by 700 district court judges? That's democracy? So if there's 15 communist crazy judges on the court, that each of them as a team working together can block and freeze each and every executive action? Joe Biden was allowed by that same court system
Some of them
to
are
import
Trump
20
judges,
million
though. Are
illegal.
The second he brings up Joe Biden, cut him off. Do not let him talk about Joe Biden. And by the way, it gets even worse. Like, you have all these judges who can just say, nah, Trump can't do that, I'm gonna halt it. But you also have cases like in Wisconsin, we cover this a lot on my channel, where you have a judge sneaking an illegal immigrant out the back door. If that judge wins that case, that means that every judge in the United States can do the exact same thing. This is why right now we have quite a crisis when it comes to judges. It looks like they're overstepping what they're actually allowed to do. We've never seen this before on such a mass scale. But again, talking about Joe Biden, you can't do that.
Foreigners
Why did Trump
into
put
this
these
country.
crazy communist judges, as you call them, on the
You
bench?
heard President Trump himself say that the Federal Society and Leonard Leo has created a broken system for judicial vetting. And God knows
He
this
did
time
say that.
around, we
So
are
does
not
that
going
mean he
to be
doesn't
using.
support
we are
picking
not
Amy
going to
Coney
be
Barrett
using-
for the Supreme Court?
What it means is simply this and nothing more. We're not going to be using the Federal Society to make judicial nominations at all going forward.
Now, as many of you are aware, one of the biggest talking points against the Trump administration is that they don't listen to judicial orders. Let's listen to what Stephen Miller has to say about this.
To following the court rulings and the legal process.
We are committed to following and obeying the laws of the United States, and the president has complied with all court orders. Am I going to sit here today and say, for example, that if a district court judge ordered us to, say, take 1,000 troops from Iraq and move them to Afghanistan, that we would just do that? If a district court judge ordered us, for example, to reveal the secret location of a CIA base overseas to the entire world, and then all the CIA officers in that base would be murdered and killed? Am I going to sit here today and engage in radical hypotheticals? This administration...
And again, these are radical hypotheticals, but that's the point. The point is a judge theoretically could write up an order and say, hey, you need to do this. Whether it's as extreme as what Stephen Miller is saying, it has been as extreme as, hey, you need to turn a plane around mid-flight and bring all those people back into the United States, illegal immigrants. And you have to put the crew at risk, and you have to have Homeland Security agents in Africa sit around waiting for court orders. That's how extreme things are getting.
Administration has religiously complied with even the most unlawful court orders, but it completely upends the constitutional system to have a single judge in Boston assert the same powers of the President of the United States is such an offense to democracy. And on this network, we heard the word democracy, democracy, democracy for God knows how many years during the Biden administration when they were trying to throw President Trump in jail, claiming somehow that was what democracy required. When in fact, the Democrat Party has been waging war against democracy. They should be renamed the Communist Party, and district court judges that are trying to keep millions of illegal aliens here to steal our jobs, to steal our livelihoods, to steal our benefits. There's nothing more on track than talking about the fact that the constitutional crisis of our time are district court judges keeping illegal aliens on our soil who have no right to be here.
I'm noticing every single time somebody talks about Joe Biden, all of a sudden, you gotta cut him off. This is like a common occurrence now, even though Jake Tapper, a CNN news anchor who came out with the book of what happened with Joe Biden's cognitive decline, he exposed that from CNN. So this is kind of odd where every single time point or cue when Stephen Miller talks about Joe Biden, I gotta cut you off. Because everything Stephen Miller is saying is absolutely true. Why is there a random judge in Boston who's allowed to make these court orders that could change the course of American history? Even in the slightest, that should not be happening. Now, I don't think we'll see Stephen Miller on CNN for a while. However, I want to remind you, one of the last times Stephen Miller was on CNN, this happened. And again, if you're drinking or eating something, you might want to put it down because you are going to laugh. Enjoy.
Chief of Staff for Policy. Stephen, thank you so much for taking time for us. So who is in charge of DOJ?
The President of the United States.
He's the administrator of DOJ?
No, the DOJ is what was formerly U.S. Digital Services. It's an agency of the federal government. That reports into the executive office of the president, which reports to the president of the United States.
Okay.
The way that Article 2 works is a president wins an election, and then he appoints staff, including myself, including Mike Waltz, including Susie Wiles,
Yes.
including Elon Musk, and those staff report to him.
I'm sure you are suspecting what's about to happen. We are about to get a 7th grade How Our Government Works class live on CNN.
Okay, well aware. So Elon Musk a week ago answered a question about transparency at Doge. This is how he spoke about Doge.
Well, we actually are trying to be as transparent as possible. In fact, we post our actions to the Doge handle on X and to the Doge website. So all of our actions are maximally transparent.
But you hear him there. We post our actions. All of our actions are maximally transparent. Does Elon Musk know he's not in charge of Doge?
Again, the president runs the government, then the president appoints advisors, including Elon, including myself, including all the other staff here at the White House, and then those staff in turn execute the president's commands and directions to all the agencies of the federal government. This is how democracy works, something that we treasure in America. The whole American people go to the ballot box, they elect the president appoints staff, the staff then administer his orders and directives across the whole U.S. government.
Okay, Stephen, I get that, but this is important because we want to talk about who's making the decisions here. There were 300 employees, the National Nuclear Security Administration, you know about this. They were fired. The agency had to rescind those terminations because these were employees who were critical to maintaining the nation's nuclear stockpile. So then who is it making those decisions of which federal employees are terminated?
Well, in that case, the Secretary of Energy would be the one. So what you're describing with the cuts in the Department of Energy, those are directed by the Senate-confirmed Secretary of Energy.
Okay, so that was the Secretary of Energy's mistake.
Well, I wouldn't use the term mistake. I would say that it's pretty standard when you're downsizing government. You make cuts, you assess those cuts, you see who needs to be rehired, who needs to be kept, who needs to be
That's not what happened here, though, Stephen. You know that. They were rescinded.
I am cringing inside listening to this interview because Stephen Miller is like, why am I here? I feel like I'm wasting my time. I also want to point out this is the era where left-leaning media and Democrats were trying to create this divide between Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And then Donald Trump went out and bought a Tesla to show everybody he actually supports Elon Musk. But this is that era of trying to paint Elon as the worst person ever and nobody knows who's in charge.
These aren't normal things. These
I
were
understand
terminations
I understand that even a temporary interruption in federal employment is a great crisis and catastrophe for you and for CNN. What the American people see is a government that is finally delivering a promise of accountability under President Trump. You want to have a conversation about transparency. Let me ask you a question. Do you have any idea where the $22 billion that the Department of Health and Human Services provided to illegal aliens under Joe Biden is right now? $22 billion with a B. That's enough to provide a free house to every homeless veteran in America.
Dang.
Where's the $22 billion? I don't know. You don't know. Nobody knows. Joe Biden just spent it, and now it's gone. Transparency begins with having an accounting of where every federal dollar is spent. And God bless President Trump for leading this effort.
Stephen, it seems like
And again, previously when Stephen Miller shows up on CNN, he was not interrupted. Notice how he talked about Joe Biden. He was allowed to talk.
crisis here had to do with the nation's nuclear stockpile. And for these particular federal workers, which I'm not, so this isn't my personal crisis, military members of the Guard
I
and
don't
the
think
Reserve.
it's a crisis,
well,
and you don't think
about
it's
this.
hold on. I don't think it's a crisis,
Stephen,
and you don't think it's a crisis. Then why are we talking about it?
Military.
Exactly. And I think this is a good place to stop. I don't think Stephen Miller is going to be loud on CNN for a while now. He typically appears every 2 months or so. I really want to see him talk to Jake Tapper again because the last time him and Jake Tapper went at it, it was hilarious. But I doubt that's going to happen because Stephen Miller would bring up all of the Joe Biden stuff and wish Jake Tapper, he exposed everything about Joe Biden. I'm sure Stephen Miller would love to face him face-to-face or camera-to-camera and call him out on it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. God bless, and we'll see you all later.